They tried to fine me for breaking the rules, thousands of dollars. But turns out they were the ones breaking almost every single one. And when I brought proof to the next HOA meeting, the entire room went dead silent. Let me rewind for a second because this whole mess started with a letter that landed in my mailbox one humid Tuesday morning. It was one of those official-looking envelopes with the HOA logo in bold. I opened it while sipping coffee and nearly spilled the whole mug when I read the first line. Notice of violation, non-compliant fence paint. Apparently, my backyard fence was the wrong color. According to them, I had altered the natural tone. Funny thing? I had never painted that fence. The boards were the same weathered brown they had been since I bought the house 4 years earlier, but they were demanding a $500 fine plus corrective repainting within 14 days. Now, I'm not the type to lose it over one notice. Mistakes happen. So, I grabbed my phone, walked outside, and snapped photos. Same fence, same color, same boring shade of wood. Then I went to the HOA office the next day to clear it up. Inside sat the board secretary, Linda, a woman who had perfected that tight-lipped smile that says, "I run this neighborhood." I explained the situation, showed her the photos, and she just shrugged. She said, "You can appeal it, but honestly, the board rarely reverses decisions." That got me thinking, rarely reverses? Even when they are wrong? That sounded fishy, but I filed my appeal anyway and left. A week passed, then another, no response. Until one morning, a second envelope arrived. Appeal denied. No explanation, just a note that failure to pay would result in additional fines. That was when the switch flipped in my head. This was not about rules anymore. It was about control. I started asking around the block, casually bringing up HOA complaints at the community mailboxes. Within 2 days, I had stories pouring in. Mark from 2 streets over got fined because his trash cans were left out too long. The rule allowed 24 hours. He moved them in 6. Another neighbor, Claire, got a violation because her shutters were not an approved shade of beige. Every story told the same thing: power, not order. That was when I decided to dig deeper. I wanted to know exactly who was making these calls and why the rules never seemed to apply to them. So one evening, I went on the HOA website and downloaded the official bylaws. I expected it to be dry reading, but man, it was an eye-opener. I learned that all board decisions were supposed to be recorded in meeting minutes, publicly available for homeowners upon request. So the next morning, I emailed the HOA asking for the last 6 months of meeting minutes. Hours later, I got a reply from Linda. Those files are not available for distribution at this time. That was my first major red flag, because according to their own bylaws, the ones they enforce so proudly, those documents must be available. I walked to the community center that afternoon, asked to see them in person. Same answer. Not available. That was when I realized this was not just incompetence, it was something darker. So I called my friend Tom, who used to be an HOA treasurer in another neighborhood. I told him what was happening. He laughed and said, "If they are hiding minutes, it usually means they are covering something up. Start checking the financials next." I had not even thought about that, but it made sense. So I requested a copy of the annual budget summary, which by law had to be posted to members. No response. I sent a second email, then a third. Nothing. A few days later, while scrolling through our neighborhood Facebook group, I saw a post from another homeowner complaining that her HOA dues had suddenly gone up by 20% with no explanation. That was my moment of confirmation. Something was seriously off. So I made a plan. If they would not give me the documents, I would find another way to get them. I remembered that the HOA's accountant, a quiet guy named Ben, sometimes attended meetings at the community center. I caught him after one of those meetings, just as he was heading to his car. I said, "Ben, I am trying to understand why my dues went up. Do you have any recent financials?" He looked nervous, glanced around, then whispered, "I should not be saying this, but check the vendor payments. Some of those contracts are unusual." He would not say more, but he pointed me toward what I needed. The next morning, I went through the HOA's online portal and found an overlooked attachments tab hidden under monthly newsletters. Buried inside were scanned invoices and payment statements, most of them routine stuff: landscaping, pool maintenance, pest control. But then one vendor name jumped out: L&J Consulting Services. No one in the neighborhood had ever heard of them, and yet they were getting thousands every month for administrative support. When I checked the listed address, it was a P.O. box in the next town. That was the moment my stomach dropped, because I remembered the HOA vice president's last name: Johnson, as in Linda Johnson. Could L&J stand for Linda and her husband Jack? It sounded like speculation, until I saw one invoice that had been scanned crookedly, and at the top you could faintly see a personal check with Jack Johnson printed on it. That was the proof I needed. At that point, I knew they were funneling HOA funds to themselves under fake consulting. And if that was true, every fine, every raised due, every violation, it was all part of a money game. But I also knew if I came at them directly, they would just deny it. So I decided to play it smart. I would build my evidence piece by piece quietly until I had enough to confront them publicly. And the perfect stage for that? The next HOA general meeting, scheduled in 2 weeks. So I started collecting screenshots of payments, photos of invoices, and copies of their own bylaws highlighting the public access rule they had ignored. I put everything in a folder labeled Project Hypocrisy. By the time that meeting rolled around, I was ready. But what I did not know then was that the board was also planning something that would turn the whole neighborhood against me before I could even speak. By the time that HOA meeting rolled around, I was walking into enemy territory with a folder full of evidence and a gut full of fire. But before I could even open my mouth, I realized they had beaten me to the punch. The meeting room was packed tighter than usual, easily 50 people crammed into the small clubhouse hall. Some looked curious, others annoyed. At the front, the board sat behind a long table like royalty judging their subjects. And right in the middle sat Linda, grinning like she already knew how the night was going to end. The moment the clock struck 7, she slammed the gavel and said, "Before we begin with homeowner concerns, I need to address a serious issue." I froze. She held up a sheet of paper, a printed email with my name highlighted. "We have received reports," she said, "that a homeowner has been spreading false accusations about the board's finances, causing unnecessary panic among residents." Then she looked right at me. "We will not tolerate defamation." The room went silent. My heart thudded hard. So that was their play. Smear me first, make me the villain before I could show my proof. I stood up, calm but shaking slightly. "If you are going to talk about me, then let us make sure everyone hears the full story." Linda crossed her arms. "You will have your 3 minutes during open floor. 3 minutes." That was all they allowed each resident to speak, but I had spent 2 weeks digging through every shady line item in their budget. 3 minutes was not enough to scratch the surface. Still, I sat down. Game on. As the meeting rolled along, I could barely focus. They talked about landscaping bids, parking rules, a new pool schedule. All filler. Then finally, open floor for homeowner comments. I stood again. The crowd shifted. I walked up to the mic and said, "My name is Adam, Lot 42, and I am here because I believe this board has been breaking the very rules they use to fine us." A few murmurs rippled through the audience. Linda leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, that fake calm look plastered on her face. I opened my folder and held up a printout. "This is a payment from HOA funds to a company called L&J Consulting Services, thousands of dollars every month. But that company does not exist outside of a P.O. box, and the person cashing those checks shares a last name with our vice president, Mrs. Johnson." You could have heard a pin drop. Linda's face turned red. She blurted, "That is a complete misrepresentation." I said, "Then please explain what L&J Consulting does, because according to your own bylaws, all vendor contracts must be disclosed to homeowners, and I have asked 3 times for access." No answer. Someone in the back muttered, "Wait, my dues went up this year too." Another person said, "So did mine." The murmurs grew louder. People started whispering, pulling out phones, snapping pictures of the invoices I was holding. I pressed on. You fined me $500 for a fence I never painted, but the board has been paying itself from our dues under fake vendor names. That is not a mistake. That is theft. Linda banged the gavel again, shouting, "Order! This is inappropriate!" I could feel the tension crackling through the room like static. That was when one of the other board members, an older guy named Carl, spoke up quietly. "Linda, maybe we should let him show what he has." That was the first sign of a crack in their wall. I placed my papers on the projector table and clicked through the pages. Payment history, same vendor, same signatures, over and over again. Then I highlighted the line where the check showed Jack Johnson's name. Gasps filled the room. Linda tried to stand, but her chair caught the carpet and almost tipped. She hissed, "This is out of context. My husband runs a legitimate business." I cut in. "Then why is the address a P.O. box registered to this neighborhood? Why does your own signature appear under approved by treasurer on the same document?" The board's treasurer, a quiet man named Susan, yes, a man named Susan, everyone called him Sue, shifted uncomfortably. "Linda, I never saw those invoices. You told me they were pre-approved." That was it. The crowd erupted, voices overlapping. "We want a refund! This is fraud! Call for a vote!" Linda slammed the gavel again, yelling, "Meeting adjourned!" and stormed out. But the homeowners stayed. Carl stood up and said, "Everyone, let us calm down. We need a special meeting to review the evidence." He looked at me and said, "Adam, can you email copies to the board and to me directly?" I nodded. Already done. That night, I went home feeling both exhausted and alive. I had finally exposed what I suspected all along, but something told me it was not over. Because when people like Linda get cornered, they fight dirty. And sure enough, the next morning I got a knock on my door. It was a certified letter, again from the HOA. Notice of delinquency, immediate payment required. They claimed I was 3 months behind on dues. Completely false. I had bank receipts showing every payment on time. That was their retaliation. I called Tom, my ex-HOA treasurer friend, and he just sighed. "Classic move. They are trying to intimidate you. Keep every record. You are doing the right thing." So I did. I printed every payment confirmation, every email, every timestamp. I turned my dining table into a war map of documents. Meanwhile, word was spreading fast through the neighborhood. Some folks thanked me quietly in the driveway. Others avoided eye contact like the whole thing was radioactive. But by the end of the week, half the homes had signs in their yards that read, "Transparency now." The pressure was building. Then I got a message from Carl. "Emergency board meeting tomorrow night. You should be there." When I arrived, only half the board showed up. Linda's chair sat empty. Carl opened the session and said, "We have reviewed the invoices provided by Adam. We also contacted the HOA accountant for verification." Ben, the accountant, was there, looking nervous again but firm. The payments were indeed authorized by the vice president under her personal oversight. There are no valid contracts for L&J Consulting. You could feel the oxygen leave the room. Carl continued, "Effective immediately, Linda Johnson is suspended from all HOA duties pending investigation." I sat there quietly, trying not to smile, but then he said something that made my stomach twist. "Adam, while your findings were helpful, you did access and share internal files without prior authorization. The board will need to discuss that separately." So now I was both hero and target. After the meeting, a few neighbors clapped me on the back, saying, "Way to go, man." But as I walked home, I knew this battle was far from finished. Linda might be out temporarily, but people like her never back down quietly. And I was right. 2 days later, someone slipped a note under my door. No envelope, just a folded paper with block letters. "Stop digging, or you will regret it." That was when I knew. I had stirred up something much bigger than bad bookkeeping. Because now it was not just about money. It was about power, and I was not done yet. That was the night I decided to dig even deeper, into their meeting records, their secret communications, and the one thing that would expose the entire board once and for all. That discovery changed everything. I did not sleep that night. I just sat there at my dining table, surrounded by stacks of papers, empty coffee mugs, and my laptop glowing in the dark like some kind of war room light. That note, "Stop digging or you will regret it," kept replaying in my mind. It was not just a warning. It was a challenge. And if they wanted me to stop, that meant I was close. So I dug deeper. I started cross-checking board meeting dates with bank withdrawals, scanned every email thread from the public HOA portal, and even downloaded archived newsletters from years back. What I found next made my stomach drop. Whole months of meeting minutes were missing, gone, deleted from the HOA's official website. But tucked away in the email logs I downloaded earlier, I found auto notifications showing that those minutes did exist, at least at one point. They had been uploaded and then removed days later. I stared at the timestamps. Guess who approved the deletions? Linda. Right there, her admin ID popped up in the metadata. And the deleted files covered the same time frame as those suspicious payments to L&J Consulting. That was the smoking gun. But I knew this could not just be my word against hers again. So I called up Carl. "You sitting down?" I said. He sighed. "Please tell me this is good news." "Better. It is proof." I showed him the email logs the next day. He leaned over my laptop, rubbing his temples. "If this is legit, the county can get involved. This is misappropriation of HOA funds and evidence tampering." That was when he said the one sentence I never expected to hear from a sitting board member. "Adam, we need to bring this to the homeowners, all of them." So we set a date for an emergency community meeting. Word spread fast again. Flyers went up, Facebook posts circulated, and by the time the evening came, the clubhouse was standing room only. Even people I had never seen before showed up. Older couples, parents holding kids, even a few teenagers recording on their phones. Linda walked in halfway through, sunglasses on indoors like she was shielding herself from shame. She did not sit at the board table this time, just stood near the back, arms crossed, glaring. Carl took the mic and started. "We have reason to believe certain HOA records have been altered or destroyed. Tonight we are going to review the findings transparently." He nodded to me. My turn. I stepped up to the front, palms sweaty but steady. I had practiced this in my head 100 times. I projected the logs on the big screen. These are the missing meeting records. Here are the timestamps when they were uploaded. And here are the deletion logs signed under the admin ID belonging to Linda Johnson. The crowd murmured. Then I showed the payments again. Same time frame, same digital signature, same pattern. All the questionable transactions happened during the same months the minutes disappeared. Someone near the back shouted, "So she was covering her tracks." Linda tried to interrupt, yelling, "You cannot prove intent." I stayed calm. "Maybe not intent, but I can prove this. HOA funds went missing, meeting records were deleted, and the only board member with access to those controls was you." The room broke into gasps and whispers. That was when another homeowner stood up, a woman named Brenda, who had been fined hundreds of dollars for having a bird bath visible from the street. She said, "We trusted you. We paid every single bill on time, and this is what you were doing behind our backs?" Linda started to leave, but the crowd blocked her path. Not physically, just with their eyes, their silence, their disappointment. Carl cleared his throat. "Based on this evidence, we are calling for an immediate homeowner vote to dissolve the current board and hold a full election." The room erupted. Hands shot up. People were clapping, cheering. For the first time, the HOA meeting felt like democracy, not dictatorship. Linda tried one last desperate move. "You cannot vote tonight. This is not on the agenda," Carl replied. "Actually, it is Emergency Transparency Clause, Section 7. You approved it 2 years ago." That line hit like a hammer. The irony of it, she had written the very rule that would remove her. When the votes were counted, the result was unanimous. The entire old board was dismissed. Linda stormed out, muttering something under her breath, but no one followed her. She was done. The next morning, the neighborhood felt different. Lighter. People waved at each other again. The tension that had been hanging in the air for months finally broke. Carl was voted in as interim president, and he immediately announced an audit with a new accountant. Within a week, we discovered over $20,000 of unexplained spending that had been quietly siphoned through fake vendors. It was surreal seeing it all in black and white. When the auditor finished his report, he looked at me and said, "If you had not documented everything, this would have kept going for years." That hit me hard. Because honestly, I had almost quit halfway through. It felt hopeless for a while, one guy against a whole system, but standing there now, watching neighbors smile and thank me, it was all worth it. A few weeks later, Linda moved out of the neighborhood. Rumor was she tried to start another HOA job in a nearby community, but once people looked up her name, that door closed fast. Meanwhile, our neighborhood meetings actually became something people looked forward to. We had open votes, budget transparency, even snacks. You know something has changed when an HOA meeting feels like a backyard get-together. The funny thing? I never wanted to be the guy who took down the HOA. I just wanted fairness, equal rules for everyone. But when those in charge forget the rules they are supposed to enforce, someone has to remind them. And I guess that someone ended up being me. A month later, I stood outside one evening, watching the sunset over the same row of mailboxes where this whole mess began. My neighbor Brenda walked by and said, "Hey Adam, I heard they are naming you unofficial watchdog of the community." I laughed. Nah, I think I have had enough HOA drama for one lifetime. But inside, I felt proud. Because this was not just about catching someone in a lie. It was about proving that even in small communities, accountability matters. As I headed back inside, I glanced at the clubhouse lights turning off one by one. For the first time, those lights did not feel like surveillance. They felt like peace. And that right there is how I exposed an HOA that forgot its own rules and helped our whole neighborhood take back control.